In aviation history, there's a story so disturbing that most experts refuse to talk about it. A commercial flight that vanished and then came back decades later. This is the chilling story of Pan Am Flight 914, or as some versions tell it, Santiago Flight 513. It's a tale that has haunted aviation enthusiasts and conspiracy theorists for decades. Depending on who you ask, it's either one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of our time or a masterfully crafted piece of fiction. Today, we're going to dive deep into the turbulence and try to separate fact from fabrication. The story usually begins on a specific date. Let's start with the most famous version, July 2nd, 1955. On that day, Pan Am Flight 914, a Douglas DC for aircraft, is said to have taken off from New York, bound for Miami, Florida. On board were 57 passengers and 4 crew members, all looking forward to a sunny getaway. But somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, the plane vanished from radar screens. Just gone. No distress calls, no debris, no oil slicks. Air traffic controllers were baffled. An extensive search and rescue operation was launched, combing the ocean for any sign of the missing plane. Days turned into weeks, but nothing was ever found. Eventually, with heavy hearts, the airline and government officials declared the flight lost at sea, all souls presumed dead. It was a tragic aviation mystery, one of many that have occurred throughout history. Case closed, or so everyone thought. This is the part most versions leave out. Fast forward 37 years. The date is September 9th, 1992. It's just another routine day at the control tower of Simon Bolivar International Airport in Caracas, Venezuela. Suddenly, a blip appears on the radar screen. An unidentified aircraft. It wasn't on any scheduled arrival lists. Air traffic controller Juan de la Corte tries to establish contact. He asks the pilot to identify themselves. The response he gets sends a shiver down his spine. The voice on the other end sounds confused, almost panicked. He asks, "Where are we?" Then, the pilot identifies his aircraft, Pan Am Flight 914, en route from New York to Miami. He reports his scheduled landing time, but the year he gives is 1955. The control tower is in a state of shock and disbelief. They check their records. Pan Am had gone out of business a year earlier, in 1991, and a flight from 1955. It sounded like a prank, but the aircraft on their radar was very real. It was an old model, a Douglas DC-4, a propeller plane that looked like a relic from a bygone era compared to the modern jets that filled the skies. Juan de la Corte, trying to keep his composure, clears the runway for an emergency landing. He informs the pilot of the current date, September 9th, 1992. The radio goes silent for a moment, then a voice filled with pure panic and disbelief comes through. "Oh my God." As the ground crew watched, the vintage aircraft made a surprisingly smooth landing. Security teams were immediately dispatched to the runway, approaching the plane with extreme caution. What would they find inside? As they got closer, they could see the faces of the passengers pressed against the windows, their expressions a mixture of confusion and fear. But before anyone could open the doors, something even stranger happened. The pilot's voice crackled over the radio again, shouting, "No, stay back, we're leaving now." Despite the ground crew's attempts to stop him, the engines of the DC-4 roared back to life. The pilot taxied the plane back onto the runway, accelerated, and took off, disappearing back into the clouds just as mysteriously as it had arrived. It was never seen again. But the story doesn't end there. The ground crew reportedly found something left behind on the tarmac where the plane had briefly stopped. It was a small pocket calendar, a 1955 pocket calendar. This small piece of evidence, along with the eyewitness accounts of the control tower staff and ground crew, became the foundation of the legend of Flight 914. It suggests a plane traveling through time, its passengers and crew completely unaware that decades had passed. But could there be any truth to it? Well, this is where things get complicated. When journalists and researchers tried to verify the story, they hit a wall of dead ends. Pan Am's archives had no record of a Flight 914 ever disappearing in 1955. There were no newspaper articles from that year reporting such a massive aviation disaster. Likewise, there were no reports from Caracas in 1992 about a mysterious ghost plane landing at their airport. The names of the air traffic controllers and other witnesses couldn't be traced. They seemed to exist only within the story itself. So where did this incredible tale come from? The trail leads back to a place you might not expect, a tabloid newspaper. In 1985, a publication called the Weekly World News ran a story about the ghost flight. They even ran it again a couple of times in the 90s. changing the dates and details slightly each time. The Weekly World News was famous for its outlandish and fabricated stories, like Batboy found in cave, and Elvis is alive. They used stock photos and created fictional experts to make their stories seem more believable. Now, let's look at the other version of this legend. The story of Santiago Flight 513. This one is even more macabre. The narrative is very similar. A Santiago Airlines Lockheed Super Constellation, Flight 513, departs from Aachen, Germany, on September 4, 1954, heading for Porto Alegre, Brazil. It disappears over the Atlantic. No wreckage, no survivors. Then, 35 years later, on October 12, 1989, an unauthorized aircraft appears in the skies over the Porto Alegre airport. Air traffic control can't make radio contact. The plane, an old-fashioned super constellation bearing the Santiago Airlines logo, an airline that had ceased to exist decades ago, circles and lands perfectly. This is where the story takes a darker turn. Airport authorities and security forces surround the plane. When they manage to force the doors open, they are met with a horrifying sight. Inside, all 92 people on board, passengers and crew, are dead. They are skeletons, still buckled into their seats. The pilot, Captain Miguel Victor Curie, is found in the cockpit, his skeletal hands still gripping the controls. The official report, according to the legend, is suppressed by the government. They refuse to offer any explanation, only stating that the plane had appeared out of a time warp. Just like the Pan Am 914 story, this tale originated in the Weekly World News. The details are different, but the blueprint is the same, a real-life fear of flying and disappearing, mixed with the irresistible allure of a time travel mystery. There's no record of a Santiago Airlines ever existing. There are no reports of a missing flight from Germany in 1954, and certainly no reports of a plane full of skeletons landing in Brazil in 1989. It's another fascinating but completely fabricated story. So why does this story refuse to die? I think it's because these stories tap into something deeply human. They combine our fascination with the unknown, our fear of the inexplicable, and our hope for miracles. The idea that time isn't linear, that a lost loved one could suddenly reappear decades later, is a powerful concept. It's a modern myth, a campfire story for the digital age. The internet has allowed these tales to spread like wildfire, evolving and changing with each share, often stripped of their original fictional source. They become urban legends, whispered from one person to another until they take on a life of their own. They prey on a kernel of truth. Airplanes do tragically disappear. The case of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 in 2014 is a painful real-life example. A modern Boeing 777 with 239 people on board vanished, and despite the most extensive search in aviation history, its final resting place remains a mystery. This real-world event shows us that even with all our technology, the world can still hold profound and heartbreaking secrets. It's in the void left by these real tragedies that fictional stories like Flight 914 can take root and grow. They offer a strange kind of comfort, a narrative even, a supernatural one to explain the unexplainable. It's almost more comforting to believe in a time warp than to accept the cold, hard reality of a crash into a vast ocean. Officially, this flight never returned. No passengers survived. No bodies were found. But if the story isn't real, why do these records still exist?